Welcome to the Resilience Sucks podcast, brought to you by the Adaptability movement. I'm Ben.
And I'm Dan.
And we're here to give you resources and tools to help you go from a state of surviving to thriving in life.
Resilience sucks the life out of you. And while it's a necessary skill, it's one that we don't want to spend too much time in or we run out of capacity. We're here to talk to you more about how to adapt and find the opportunity in change so you can really go about thriving in your own life.
Welcome to another episode of the Resilience Sucks podcast. Today we're in for a treat. I've got my co-founder of the NEXA Sports Performance and the Adaptability movement, Ben Haren, with me. So welcome, Ben.
Thank you very much.
Ben does a lot in the background of these podcasts. So if you've ever watched one of these or you've listened to them online, Ben's often the person that takes all of our footage and cuts it up and pops up little snippets on social media and does all the sort of the post recording processing. So without him, I'd be completely lost with all this. That is not my strength. My strength is talking to people. So Ben, the reason we got you on here today is early on in recording this podcast, we had a bit of a reflections session and just talked about kind of what we've learned in the process of running particularly the adaptability movement and what experiences we're having in that, as well as some of the current projects and experiences we've been having with those people that we're working with. So welcome. And one of the things we're going to do today is talk about your process of adaptability. So the moment in your life where you learnt, the value of adaptability because of going through a challenge where, you kind of ascended towards a goal and achieve that goal, and then quite soon after that was a feeling of that being taken away from you. So we might as well start with that.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about getting into the process of getting drafted and about footy and the build up to that.
Yeah, so I guess to start, we thought that, obviously we were always sharing other people's stories of adaptability and we have lived our own adaptability stories throughout our lives, and there are many instances of where we've had to adapt and change and learn from what we've gone through, and I guess the biggest story for me of adaptability and has always been my story of getting drafted. And so I was fortunate enough as at 18 years old to get drafted straight out of school. Got picked up by the Sydney Swans in the rookie draft. This is back in 2010. So, 18 years old. I remember sitting at the computer with my dad and my brother. Back in those days, the rookie draft wasn't on TV or anything like that. So I was just sitting there, waiting for the picks to come up. Got to pick 36, whoever it was, took that pick 37, and pick 38 came up, and Sydney Swans, who I'd had a little bit of a conversation with, but not too much. So I didn't really expect them to pick me up. It was actually Richmond who I was expecting to pick me up because I'd trained with them the week prior. And yeah, my name came up. You're sitting there in disbelief, and the three of us all kind of went, oh! And it was a split second or a couple of seconds before, and we were like, yeah! Like everyone kind of, celebrated. But it was just, at first, I think it was that moment of shock that it actually happened. You go through your whole life up to that point, wanting to get drafted and wanting to be on an AFL list, and that's your dream, and all of a sudden your name's popped up, and that dream has been realised. I was 18 years old. I remember that night. Invited all my friends and family around. Had a bit of a party to celebrate the fact that that I'd been drafted, and the next day I was on a plane and off to Sydney. So it happened that quick. So I guess that's the first sort of. I mean that was the point where the high started to get to sort of really get to that point where it was I was finally seeing my dream and actually starting to live my dream. Where I mean for a long time prior to that, there'd been a lot of build up to that. It wasn't just one day I rocked up and
yeah, of course,
all of a sudden I got drafted. So there was many highs and lows, in the process up to there, which I'm sure we'll probably
absolutely. And we might as well go straight to that now. So one thing you've shared with me is you kind of, or you'd always had that vision in your head that that's where you wanted to go with your football, and And I remember you sharing a story with me about when you're at school and there was a speaker that came in, just sort of share this story and to kind of extract things from the crowd in terms of, well, where do you want to go with, what's your big dream?
Yep.
And you shared a story with me about playing small in that moment, like to not sharing the thing that you were really sort of, wanting to realize in your life because you didn't want other people to sort of think, poorly of you or something, or think you were too, arrogant or had an ego or something like that. So, maybe that's a good point to pick it up.
Yeah. So, I guess that story you're referring to, I think it was year 11 at school. Is either end of year 11, start of year 12, and a guy came in and did a whole presentation around, what do you want to do in the future? Like, if you could do anything, what would it be? And I distinctly remember, wanting to put down play AFL, but at the time I thought that A, it wasn't realistic for me, and B, if I did put it down, that people would just like, oh yeah, whatever, like you're not going to play AFL type stuff. And growing up, I was always someone who, I always cared a lot about what people thought of me. It was almost that people pleaser in a way, which, looking back, wasn't the best trait to have, but it was something that I always liked. Everyone likes being liked, especially when they're growing up, and everyone wants to fit in and whatnot. And from a young age, I was always good at sport, just general sport, like not one sport in particular, just physically pretty good at most things. And going through primary school and then high school, like you'd always get teased that you're showing off or you're trying too much, or you really. You really talk, like we have that whole tall poppy syndrome here in Australia, where we try and tear people down if they're getting too far ahead of themselves. Yeah. So I learned from a young age that if I'm actually better than people at sport, they'll try and tear me down and they won't like me because of that. And so I think that actually probably stunted a bit of my progress in sport, because I didn't try as much because I didn't want people to sort of tear me down. But yeah, and then, going back to that story, I remember instead of putting down AFL player, I put down architect or something, which...
Right. Tell us how that's going.
Yeah, no, it's good. I'm designing a building at the moment. So, yeah, but it was something that throughout high school I toyed with the idea of, post-school that could be a possible career option for me, which I'm very glad it never eventuated that way now. So... but yeah, and it was just all around the fear of not actually, not realizing my goal, or people not thinking I can achieve that goal, or it's something like that.
There's a lot of things that play into that. Like there's the whole fear of failure. There's the fear of not being accepted. That you'll be labelled as something else and therefore not fit in with everyone else. And so there's a kind of, without being too negative, like there's a lot of forces working against you as a young person, trying to understand yourself, to find your own identity within that, and to be brave enough and courageous enough to put that out there and go, this is me. Like, do you accept me for that or not at all? And this, when you talk about a schooling system that gets all of the 17-year-olds together and all the 16-year-olds together and all the 15-year-olds together, like, it's not really conducive to that personal, individualised growth. It's really about, well, as long as we get everyone through and we don't leave too many behind, then we've done our job. And and in the same precipice, that if someone's too far ahead, well, then you almost pull them back to the pack because that's unfair on the ones that are not keeping up. And it's where do we get that sort of individualised kind of opportunity to learn and grow? Without the fear of judgment, without the fear of whether you fit in or not. And I think that stories just illustrates that, in that it takes real courage, like to be able to work through those things and to be brave enough to say, this is what I want to be. Like your story reminded me of one where I grew up in Tassie, and we didn't have the same access to kind of scouts coming down and people kind of coming in from the AIS and doing testing, but we had one teacher who came into the school that was innovative enough to bring that to us. And my perfectionist kind of personality at the time was like, we did all this testing and I felt like I could have done better. So I actually withheld my form because I wanted to go back in and repeat a test because I knew I could do it better, and then missed the submission date of it, and then it never got to go to the AIS in the first place. So there was people around me who weren't as accomplished athletes that got invited to go through this testing process, and I missed out from that other reason why you don't sort of get or reach the sort of heights that you hope to early in your career. And so I think it's important to kind of share that with people, because there's a lot of young people out there right now going, yeah, that's my dream, I'm going to get drafted. And there's people that are realistic about that. There's people that are very optimistic about that. There's people pessimistic about that. I think you need a little bit of from each column to be able to make it work for you, because if you're really negative about it, you're probably going to self-limit and you're going to self-sabotage somewhat to what you're doing. If you're really optimistic about it, you're probably not acknowledging the realities, which are that not many people get drafted in the first place. Yeah. And of those that get drafted, something like 11% never play a game. Nearly 40% don't even make it to 10 games. So there's this huge expectation that once you get drafted, you're going to be a 100, 200 game player at a club, and that's going to be a career, and it's going to set you up for life. It's not the reality of it. And so coming back to that and trying to be grounded as a 15, 16, 17-year-old in that process, that's hard to do. Yeah. So we need people to guide that process and to support people in doing that.
And I was always someone that I always wanted to get drafted, but I wouldn't say I was a standout footballer from a young age. Like I was pretty good, but it wasn't probably until I was 15 that I won my first best and fairest when I was 15. There was a few sort of squad, like under 13, 14 sort of squads that I missed out on, in your sample teams and that type of thing. So I was above average footballer, but I was never one that you'd look at and be like, that guy's going to play AFL type thing. And I think that's a message for young people who are listening now, is that just because you're 13, 14, 15, even if you're 17 and you're not getting invited to your SNFL club, or you're not making teams or whatever, it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. Like if you can put the right things in place, if you can continue, determination and perseverance is something that I think got me far in my career in the end. And I've played with a lot of players who were a lot better than me physically, but they fell by the wayside because they didn't have the perseverance or the mental knowledge or adaptability to be able to continue to further their career in sport, because other things came and got in the way, and they thought, this is too hard, I'll give up and never go with it. So. Yeah.
And there was, like you shared with me, that there was a bit of a turning point within that junior development sort of pathway, and that you didn't make a lot of state teams as a junior, which is not common for someone that gets drafted. And then it was, this fortunate turn of events where someone came into your life and sort of saw something in you, and then chose to kind of invest in that and foster it. And this is a great lesson in sort of seeking out mentors and accountability buddies and people that can help guide you on this process, because if it weren't for that, you might have just been another story of someone that almost got drafted. And conversely, on the other side of it, had you had more of that support post getting drafted, well then maybe that career would have continued to flourish rather than it sort of coming to a premature end at that level at least.
Yeah, so the person you're speaking of is Tony Bamford for me. Who, when I was 15, 16 years old playing at Port Districts, I wasn't getting a go out at the Eagles because I was in their zone, and he saw me one day and said, who's that kid? I want to get him out. He was coaching the Port Magpies at the time, under 18s. So I want to get him out to the Port Magpies, and I was like, cool, yep, opportunity. And then he said, he goes to me when we were sort of having a meeting about coming across. He goes, I'm actually going to send you out to the state team trials, and to me I was like, what? I was like, I can't even make the Eagles team. You wanted me to go out for the state team, and he was just someone that sort of saw something in me and believed in me, and he was really supportive of me. Like I was still playing, I was on a volleyball scholarship at the time, and he allowed me to miss trainings and do whatever I needed to make it work between the two of them, because I think he understood the benefits I was getting from the volleyball was ultimately going to help my footy long term. But he was just always someone that encouraged me to be the best I could be, and ultimately he ended up, ended up becoming a senior SNFL coach, and I obviously ended up getting drafted. And you know, it's one of those what's called sliding door moments where, you know, if he never saw me play, like, would I have, you know, made my way to where, would I have made it to the AFL, would I have made it to the SNFL, or would I have just been one of those guys who stayed playing at my amateur league club and just, you know, played A's, B's, whatever there until I was whatever age type thing. Yeah. Who knows? But I'm very grateful for the I guess the support he gave me, and also it probably gave me a lot of belief in myself as well. That, you know, to see someone, you know, who's willing to invest in me.
Yeah, it's a great lesson, because like, how often you hear about a child that, like, again, the turning point in their education or in their career was that one person that they felt connected to as an adult role model within that system. And like, you know, most kids that sort of find their way or navigate their way into adulthood successfully are ones that have had someone like that in their life. So sometimes that is a parent, but obviously, you know, we've learned, like, a lot of parents are like, I told them to do that thing that you got them to do that they're now doing, but they wouldn't do it for me. It's like, well, it's actually not on you. Like, that's their relationship with you, and it's difficult in a parent-child relationship. But as professionals, that's our job, and we've, you know, I'd say we're kind of good at it. Like, I don't think that's unfair to say. Like, but, you know, to be that person in someone's life. So do you leave that up to chance, or do you seek it out? Like, knowing that is something that is so pivotal in like a child's development or a young person's development. Like, how can you then set that up and introduce that as an opportunity for all of the kids in that age group to be exposed to it? So then you get more people sort of potentially getting drafted each year, or a better chance of each person at least reaching their potential and learning those life lessons that are going to serve them everywhere else as well. Yeah. So, you know, that we'll obviously talk more about that, but that comes back to what, you know, we're talking about with our Adaptable Academies and some things that we're running clubs at the moment. So let's come back to your story still. So we've talked about that moment of getting drafted, that elation, the process of being on a plane the next day to go to Sydney, like, you know, having your name read out in that thing, that's a big deal. Like, I've watched a couple of drafts in my time. I got, you know, quite close and trained with clubs as well, and, you know, I didn't get called out. So I understand, like, the opposite of that, and the way that it's so deflating, and you're like, man, like, that's it, I missed it. Like, again, like being a late starter in footy, you sort of continue to write yourself off until proven otherwise. And so for you, you know, you had your name called out. There was a build up to that, you know, someone that sort of took your side, believed in you, and helped guide you through that process. You've arrived in Sydney now. What's the feeling? Like, what's going on for you? You've had all this sort of support and guidance, and you've achieved that dream of getting drafted. What now?
Well, I mean, it's a crazy period of your. Well, it was a crazy period of my life, because, you know, I've gone from being an 18-year-old who literally just turned 18, you know, just finished school a couple of weeks before, you know, still lived at home with mum and dad, rarely cooked meals or cleaned or did whatever. Like, I just, you know, had most of my washing and stuff done for me. So then, you know, moving halfway across the country and, you know, living with random people who I literally just met that day, and and then also meeting, you know, 44 new teammates or whatever it was, plus, you know, the rest of the staff at the footy club, including like coaches and admin staff and all that sort of stuff. It's a pretty surreal experience. Like, I still remember the day I walked into the club, and I remember you can find it on YouTube. There's this terrible interview of me. Maybe we'll link it on here. See how we go. This interview of me literally rocking up there, and like, it's like an hour from when I rocked up to me doing this interview, and then meeting all the players. I still remember my first day of meeting Adam Goods, and just how big his hands were when I first shook his hand. I was like, holy moly, your hand is huge. And just that whole experience of, you know, you always dream of what it would be like, you know, to play AFL and get drafted and stuff, but you never really think about what are those things that are going to happen. You know, getting drafted, but then, okay, now I need to move, and then, you know, where am I going to live, and who am I going to live with, and all this stuff. And I mean, that was all sorted for me, so it wasn't my decision to for any of that. But it was just, you know, I just remember the whole first week, 2 weeks, whatever it was, just being this whirlwind of, because I think I was there for, I reckon it was 2 weeks before, 2 or 3 weeks before the Christmas break, and then went back home. But yeah, it was just this crazy thing of moving to a new place, and like I'd been to Sydney once when I was 5 years old or something, so had no idea about Sydney or anything like that. And you know, coming from Adelaide to Sydney, it's a completely different city in terms of like traffic and you know, the number of people and all this sort of stuff. So yeah, it was a pretty crazy whirlwind experience. And then yeah, going into, you know, getting settled into training. I was coming off an injury. I was injured basically half the year before I got drafted. You know, so I had to go through, you know, medical screenings, rehab, all this sort of stuff before I was cleared to do any training. So I remember the first few weeks, I think it was at least till after Christmas, I wasn't allowed to train fully with the squad, which was a little bit, like it felt like there was this gap between, like that I was missing out on. Sure. Like I wasn't fully getting not accepted, but I wasn't fully being a part of what was going on because I was in rehab. So I think that was a little bit of a challenge, but yeah, I still remember everyone sort of, you know, getting around you and getting to know you and whatnot, and yeah, I think it was a time full of learning, full of experiences, and like I don't think I've grown up as much in probably in that 3 weeks as I have in many months of the rest of my life. So.
And so, like, 18 years old, you're already 18 by then?
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, to be living at home, to, you know, have, you know, parents that are doing the washing, the cooking, the everything, so you kind of just, you're going to school and you're training, really, aren't you? And then to get just sort of picked up and plucked and then dropped over here like a skill tester, and it's like, now what? Like, you'd want to hope that when that moment comes and you get drafted, that you get to a new club and you're able to just focus on footy, and yet you're now having to focus on how do I cook a meal, how do I wash my own clothes, how do I live with other people that I've never lived with before.
Yeah, I remember even like my dad coming over at one stage, and I had to, like, you know, I had to get my own Medicare card and stuff like this, and like I had to, like, you know, get my own bank cards and like whatever. Like it was just a whole new world for me that I didn't know I had to do all this stuff, and all of a sudden there's all this responsibility on me. Whereas, you know, most of my mates are back home, you know, you got, you know, 3-4 months off before uni starts, and they're just cruising around doing nothing. So yeah, I was doing a lot of growing up very quickly.
Yeah, and it's a challenge, right? So like, again, you want to be focused on footy, you want to make the most of the opportunity, and yet you're distracted by all of these other things that are going on. And for you, being in a separate state, so you haven't got that same level of family support. And I know how big family is for you. Like it's, you know, it's probably a top priority, I would imagine. Yeah. And to not have that there, and it's pros and cons, like probably to be separated from that home environment to some degree, and to friendship groups makes it a little bit easier to focus on footy. But then if you're overwhelmed by all these other things that are happening, well, then you've kind of lost that social support as well to be able to sort of navigate that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, definitely.
You know, it is a big challenge, and so you've done that, you're there, Dad's come in. What happened after he left? Because I know how close you are with your dad too. Like, was there any sort of feelings of, oh crap, I'm on my own again, or?
Well, I think he actually didn't. I can't remember. To be honest, I can't remember when he came. I think they might have came like a week or so after I'd been there. So I think the club like flew them up or whatever.
Beautiful.
And so they helped me get a few things in order, and then yeah, I think it was a lot of like each day kind of learning more about, you know, I'd never apart from a school curriculum schedule, whatever, I never had a diary or a schedule or anything like that. Like I didn't know when to rock it. Like I remember one of the first days I drove myself, like I borrowed one of the other guys' cars and drove to training, and I got lost, and you know, back then, you know, didn't have your maps on your phone and stuff. It still had the street direction, and pulling out the street direction. And Sydney's an absolute nightmare to try and like one-way streets and stuff. You can get lost and can't get back really, really quickly. And I remember rocking up to training, you know, I'm walking in the door, everyone else is walking out onto the oval to start training, and I was like, oh no, you know, and got a bit of a I mean, they'll find about it because obviously they understood I was still quite new, but you know, they kind of give me a bit of a talking to, like, you can't be rocking up as everyone else is kind of going out.
You're not Adam Goods yet.
No, but even in regards to that, like the whole thing around, you know, when I needed to get to training, you know, what I needed to do before training, all this sort of stuff. I just rocked up at training. You know, training was at, you know, it used to be at 5 o'clock. I used to rock up at 4:55 and run out there and in my full kit already or whatever. But now, you know, you're rocking up to training. You know, training might start at 8 o'clock in the morning. Most guys are usually there by at least 7, and you know, doing, you know, prehab stuff and you know, going to talk to physios or doing a bit of extra ball work or whatever it was. And you know, at that age, I just didn't know that was. Yeah. I think that's probably one thing that, looking back, that the club didn't probably do that well of a job of is setting those clear expectations of, you know, this is when you come to training, this is, you know, what we expect of you, blah, blah, blah. Like, I remember it was kind of that you kind of had to fumble your way and find your way out, and other players would tell you stuff and whatnot, but and I don't know if it's what it's like now, but like, it would have been good for someone to just run me through and go, okay, you know, training starts at 8, you got to be here by 7. You know, this is what you need to do before training. You know, this is the stocks and the schedule, but you are also expected to do this and this and whatnot. But it was just very much kind of, you know, work it out yourself type thing, which, I mean, I was an adult then, and you know, I mean, other adults in that environment work out themselves, but as someone who didn't yet have the tools to understand that, and particularly with all this other stress and whatnot that's coming on involved, it was quite a challenge for me. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're 18 years old. I imagine most people on here would be like, "Yep, I had no freaking clue at 18 years old, and I'm sure I didn't." And so, you know, to just pick you up and drop you in that situation, like, you need a lot of support, like. And that's not unreasonable. Like, yes, there's 40 odd blokes on a list, but if there's 12 news draftees or maybe less coming in, well, then having something, you know, dedicated to that process and individualized. So, because each person's going to come in with a different set of learnings, a different set of biases, like a different, you know, childhood. Yeah. So it's like, well, how can we sort of customize that to each person, again, to give them the best chance of reaching their potential? I mean, to me, it makes sense. Like, it would be an investment in what you're doing. Like, if you're bringing someone to a club, well, that costs you money to do that. Yeah. You know, you're going to be paying for them, you're going to be helping them get set up. So why wouldn't you want them to get the most out of themselves, rather than having to turn over quickly again, bring new people in, go through the same process, and, you know, getting a minimal kind of return on investment. Yeah. And, you know, I guess, like, the great thing about your story is that when you share that gives other people an opportunity to sort of preempt what might be ahead, to be able to plan for that and be able to navigate some of the things early on before they reach that point of getting drafted, so when they get there, they can just focus on footy. Yeah. Because you're 18. Yeah. And you're getting around with these sort of, you know, guys in their mid to late 20s that are very, by that point, quite successful footballers. They know the ropes and stuff. And yet it's almost like, oh, well, come on, mate, just, you know, get it together and you know, pull yourself back together, because you're still new here. Yeah, and I think that's what we work on a lot now, obviously, with, you know, the sports academies and stuff that we run, is that we want to help, you know, these younger athletes to understand, okay, whether you get drafted or whether you know, make it to whatever professional level or whatever it is, you know, we'll give you tools that you can use that are going to help you along the way. Things like, you know, being able to be more adaptable, you know, being able to, you know, create a schedule, being able to, you know, create habits or routines or stuff like that, which all that sort of stuff, I wish I knew that before I went. All these different tools that they can use, so that if they get hit with a, you know, some sort of situation, that they're not just going to fall apart because they don't know what to do. They have the understanding of, all right, like, this is the situation. What tools do I have in my bag that I can apply to this situation? And teaching them from a young age, from whether it's, you know, 13, 14 years old, like some of the people that we work with, it's not about, I'm not teaching a 13-year-old how to live the life of a AFL player. I'm teaching them lessons that they can use in their daily life to get incrementally better, so that then, you know, by the time they do hit 18 years old, they have all this experience in doing all this other stuff, so that then whatever they're sort of faced with in the future, they're a lot more equipped to handle it. So just to give people a bit more perspective on what's going on. So obviously within the business, we have many different sort of things that we do, and clubs, business and organisation, schools that we work with. So different sort of teams basically in each of those different environments. one of those things that we do is we work with sports clubs or sporting schools to run what's called Adaptable Sports Academies. And the Adaptable Sports Academies is what Ben was just talking to. So it's about how we help people during those formative years as they approach sort of the, I guess, that turning point in a career where you either get drafted or you don't, or you get selected in a state team or whatever it might be, to guide them through that process, to give them the tools of adaptability, the underpinning sort of commonality between everything we do, so that our job is to lead them through experiences in the lead up to that so that they can find their own way. They can, we can facilitate that learning in a way that by the time they get to, the draft year or getting drafted, that they're prepared. They feel like they have the tools to be able to respond to any situation rather than being caught off guard and going, oh, and then, having to get thrown onto this fast track of learning, which they may not be prepared for, especially if they're, the way, so each person responds differently to stress, right? So
Yep.
we have generally have the flight, the run away from stress, the freeze that just, like a deer in the headlights doesn't know what to do, waiting for more information maybe, and then the fighters who, can be expressed as either, great determination or completely imploding or exploding because of that sort of energy that just has to be expended somewhere. So what we're trying to do is help people understand which one of those they are, how they can use that effectively, and then give them the tools so that when they get to a situation, they can ground themselves first emotionally to then be able to make effective decisions and choices on their way to pursuing their goals. Yeah. So that's what the Adaptable Sports Academies are. And just to, again, not everyone knows exactly what we do. That we're listening to a podcast that's Resilience Sucks, and that is Resilience Sucks the life out of you. And we're trying to demonstrate that if you need to focus on more than just your coping strategies. You need to understand how you pivot, how you are mentally agile and flexible, and how you become a great responder so that you can create things in your life. You can move towards something special.
Yeah, basically we want to take our experiences that we've personally had in sport, in life, in general, to then teach these kids things that they don't have to then experience that to be able to take lessons from it. They can go through some learnings by doing some practical experiential learning, like in a controlled environment, that they're not actually they're not waiting till they're 18 years old and they're drafted to find out that, oh man, if I did a bit of meditation when I get really stressed out, that's actually going to help me calm down type thing. It's like,
and what kind of meditation works for me, and how do I do that, and how often do I do it?
So it's giving them this repertoire of tools that they can just use, not only in their sport but in all areas of life. Like we've had parents talk about how much their kids eating habits have become better because of some of the stuff that we've done with them, and it was just simply telling kids around all right, well, if you want to, play really good footy, and you're eating KFC and Macca's all the time, well, those two things actually don't align. Like it's like in order to fuel your body properly, you need to eat the things that are going to give your body the right fuel. It's like putting diesel in an unleaded car type thing. It's like you want to try and do that, and and they've said, and the others have mentioned things around how much it's been helping them with their school and with their homework and all that sort of stuff. So the big thing for us is that it's helping them in all the areas of their life, not just sport.
Yeah, for sure. It's helping people be more self-sufficient, to be okay, doing things themselves, to feel good about doing that because of what that allows them in the way of choice and in the ability to build healthy relationships that aren't based on dependency. Yeah. So. Yeah, and then I mean we've got a course coming out shortly, and we'll put a link in the bottom here for a bit of a pre-sale to it. It's all about how to get drafted, how to help yourself. Sorry, it's called how to get drafted to the AFL or AFLW, and it's all those key lessons that from our lives that we've learned along the way that is going to help give you the best chance to get drafted. And you don't necessarily get drafted. It might be to make it to an SANFL team, SAFLW team, or just even the A grade team or something, your local club. But it's going to teach you these tools that's going to help you, mentally, physically, emotionally, on and off the field, so that you can then play the best that you possibly can be, and then ultimately, if you want to get drafted, it's going to give you the best chance that you possibly can to get drafted. And these tools aren't limited to football. Like
no,
we're using football as an easy universal example that most people can understand, but it could be about I said, getting a scholarship at the Sports Institute. It could be, about getting selected within your state netball team. Like, there's all these other examples of how this works. The lesson is more about how do we create adaptable, self-sufficient human beings that are capable of exploring those goals, and about sort of seeking out challenge, to welcome that opportunity to learn and fail and to learn again, to actually move towards the thing that you want.
Yeah, fundamentally every sport needs the same thing. Obviously the skill itself is slightly different from sport to sport, but the underpinning things are basically very similar. So
yeah, for sure. So we're at Sydney. You've kind of settled in a little bit. It's post Christmas now, and you're starting to get back into full training. Where to from here?
So started to get a bit more comfortable, and was really getting back to full fitness again. So I'd had a stress fracture in the previous year before going. That year it was in my left ankle, I believe. So get back to full training, starting to get my standards up to where they need to be, and trial games come around. I remember we were sitting in a room with some of the development coaches, and we were doing out like goals or whatever it was, and I think most of the boys like to play like one NAB Cup game, and I remember play one NAB Cup game, and everyone else put it. So I was like everyone else doing it. I was like, sure, why not? I want to play a NAB Cup game. And I remember the coach going, it might be a bit of a stretch for you, based on injuries and where you're at and all that sort of stuff, and being like I was quite a slender, like I was 6'6". When I got there, I think I was 91 kilos, which for a 6'6" guy is not very
about
big.
12 to 15 kilos off where you need to be.
Especially trying to play AFL. So I think in the peak of my footy career, I was playing at around 100. And that was still I was never a big man. I was always a sort of more slender, athletic style big man. So a big focus was on me trying to put on more weight and size and muscle, and then just fit into the game plan and learn all that sort of stuff. Ended up playing, I think it was 3 games in the reserves. So back then the reserves were playing in the Canberra League, and it was a bit of a. Some teams were okay, some teams were not very. We won games like 200 points sometimes. Wow. There were games where we won, and then we'd have to do a running session after the game because we didn't run enough because it was too easy every game type thing. I remember my first game was a trial game, and I remember the first quarter I didn't get a touch, and I was like, this is my first game, first quarter playing at Sydney, and I was like, oh no. I was like, this is not good. To be fair though, that in that game I was playing like in the forward line there was Sam Reid, who's still playing at Sydney now, Jesse White, who played at Sydney and Collingwood for a long time, Trent Dennis-Lane, who was a very handy player, Swans, St Kilda, used to kick 10 goals in the reserves on a weekly basis. Who else was it? Like Luke Parker was in the forward line, all this sort of stuff, and I was like, well, it's a pretty good forward line. So to get a kick is actually quite a challenge. But I remember kicking my first goal that game. I think it was in the second or third quarter. It was like someone had let out, and I was kind of just sort of leaning behind them. It came over the back, I got it, and I just got kind of snapped around my shoulder from 40 metres out or something. And it was actually a pretty good goal. And I was like, oh, that was not bad. And from there, I kind of felt a lot more comfortable. And but still, it was always a challenge. I always felt like I wasn't, good enough. Like I should be the one. I always held back because I'll let someone else get it all. But when you're in AFL, you basically need to go. Actually, no. Like I'm getting this, and if you want this, you got to take it off me, type thing. Because it's a cutthroat industry, and totally. You can't let other people do stuff because then you make them look good, and and you don't look as good, and all of a sudden you're back playing wherever. So and then. I think it was 3 or 4 games into the season. We're playing the Gold Coast Reserves at the SCG, and my ankle just started to get sore again. basically the same way it did the first time, and ended up going off. Having a scan, and it turned out I had another stress fracture in the other ankle this time. So, which I knew was going to be 3 to 6 months at least before I sort of got back into playing training. Which ultimately I never played another game after that. So, I was there for another however many games, and was sitting on the sideline watching all the time. So
that's tough.
Yeah, it was, and it was.
And you're not the sort of person that will often share that stuff as well. It's not that you're hiding it, but like you often like to look at the optimistic side of things.
Yeah.
Can you just sit with that a little bit for us? Can you share like how crappy that felt?
I mean, to be honest, I haven't really thought about it much, especially in the last few years. So I have to be really searching back to remember how I was feeling. But I do remember feeling very sort of disappointed and upset. But I still was very optimistic in the time. I was still like, I'll get back, and I'll still play and all this sort of stuff. And I remember my manager having a chat to me, when it happened. He's like, "Nah, it's all good. Like they're loving you. You get another year. All this sort of stuff." And then I remember, to be honest, the hardest thing was just getting, rehab is the worst place to be in an AFL, on an AFL list, because you're doing a lot more training, a lot, more often, by yourself, usually in some sort of dungeon style thing.
Right.
So at Sydney, there's basically like a sweat box downstairs, which is full of rollers, bikes, treadmills, all this sort of stuff. And that's where we do all our cardio work. You do your boxing. I remember I was doing a boxing session once with, I don't know if you remember Mike Pike. He's the Canadian ruckman guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Huge man, massive, absolutely ripped as anything.
Yeah.
And we were doing a boxing, like a genuine sparring session, and he was just beating the absolute crap
I bet
out
he
of
was.
me. and again, not going easy on me. If you're in an AFL environment, you're fair game no matter what. And I was just sitting there just taking it. I was like, oh my God. But I do remember there would be times. I actually had 2 weeks where I asked to come back home in the middle of it. I think I kind of suggested it, and they kind of approved it. I can't remember how the process happened, but I ended up coming back for 2 weeks just to get away from it for a while, because when your life is football 24/7 and you actually can't do the thing that you're designed to do, it was quite challenging. And Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning, doing 3 hours of cardio basically was brutal every single week. So
it does a lot to dampen enthusiasm, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And people think about being an AFL player, and they see all the people kicking goals on the MCG and how amazing that must be, but they don't see the behind the scenes work that goes into it. Even if you are playing, you're still doing huge amounts of work just to be able to play at that level. And I remember Henry Playfair was the one of the player development coaches there when I was there, and he said to me one day, he's like, worst case is thinking about it is that you're getting paid to work out. And I remember I was like, oh yeah, okay, that's not, and that sort of put me in a better frame of mind for a while, because I was like, well, I'm literally just working out. I'm getting fit and strong and stuff, and I'm getting paid to do it basically.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, it was bloody torture. So
yeah, of course. It's funny, I played against Henry Playfair in the VFL when I was playing for the Tassie Devils. So there's a lot of names there that sort of crossed over across our two careers, despite the fact we didn't know each other until well beyond any of that. And look, so again, it comes back to sort of the whole thing. It's like 70% of people aren't going to even make it to 50 games, and yet there's this expectation that you get drafted and you're going to be have an AFL career. And so you get to the end of that first season, and your managers. So you've played 3 games, was it?
Something like that. Yeah.
So played three games. You're back on the injury list, but your manager's telling you sort of doing the right things. You're still probably unsure of yourself, and a bit unsure of.
Yeah, I was never. I mean, I was never convinced that I was automatically just going to get another year or anything like that. I still I still didn't believe that I was an AFL player as such. I'd always be like, oh yeah, I'm still young. The people that rock up. I remember so Luke Parker was drafted the same year as me, and he basically rocked up and just told everyone that he didn't tell everyone, but his actions told everyone that he was just going to play straight away, and he played within the first 10 weeks of the season or something. Whereas for me, I was kind of like, thinking like, I'm young, and people would say, told people, take a while to progress, and so in my mind, I was like, if I play within 3 or 4 years, they'll be good type thing.
Yeah.
Whereas I should have had the attitude of no, I need to do everything I can right now in order to sort of progress my career and play as soon as I possibly can. But I always just doubted myself and didn't think that I was at that level. Like I was always, I guess it was a little bit of imposter syndrome, but running around and playing and training with the likes of Adam Goods and Tyconelli and Joe McVeigh and all these types of guys. I never thought that I was anywhere near at their level type thing. When in reality, it actually wasn't that far off. Like if you think about it, it's actually not that far.
Yeah. So was there any kind of mental, emotional support through that process? Like, because again, first year you've moved to Sydney without all of that sort of emotional and social support back home. You've now started an injury list, finished on the injury list for the year, played 3 games. Like, I imagine that could have been quite useful if you had that support.
I mean, like Henry Playfield he was basically my coach, and he was pretty good in sort of supporting me, and the player welfare guy Dennis Carroll at the time was quite good, but it was just they just check in, see how you're going and all that sort of stuff. There wasn't much in regards to it, I don't think, and I think it was this was 12 years ago, so I don't think we're as advanced as we are now in terms of the whole mental health, all that sort of side of things. So I definitely don't think that there was the things in place that probably could have been in place. And I know that once I'd left, once I got delisted and left the AFL system, that the AFLPA had send out a guy to have a chat to you and see how you're going type thing. And, I remember doing something briefly with him, and that was it. And then you kind of left to your own thing. Which,
it's kind of well intentioned, but sometimes it comes a bit of a tick the box scenario.
Yeah.
And especially with a young person who's come out of a schooling system where you're told to kind of sit down and shut up to a certain degree.
Yeah.
And so that when someone finally asks you for your opinion or how you're feeling, there's a resistance to giving and sharing all of that.
Yeah.
That to me, it's a ticking time bomb. For people to kind of you're escalating, you're moving upwards, you're ascending towards the peak of what you want to achieve, and then all of a sudden you fall off the side of the cliff on the way to being this far from your goal, and then what? It's a big, and again, you're talking about an 18, 19-year-old experience in this. You're not talking about someone in their late 20s that's had some life experience.
Yeah, well, basically, up until then, my whole life was leading up to the point of getting drafted and being drafted, and I was living the life of an AFL player. And so that's all I ever thought about. I never thought about, what happens if it doesn't work out, or what happens if once I get delisted, or anything like that. And I remember my dad encouraging me to go to uni open days and all that sort of stuff and check out. They don't encourage you to study uni in the first year there because it's just too overwhelming.
Absolutely.
But then the second year they were kind of encouraging me to look into some stuff, and I kind of half-assed didn't really look into it that much. And again, I think it was just around that thing of it was me being not innocent, what's the word? I was just didn't know what I didn't know type thing, and so I just expected it was going to continue. Didn't think about what was not going to happen. Whereas you see those players who prepare throughout their career. They might study something, or they might do some work experience somewhere, or get do some stuff in the media or something like that, whereas they get all these experiences and learn all these different tools, so then once they're finished, they're not just this footballer who has no experience doing anything or except playing football. They've actually got this sort of whole kit of things that they can sort of fall back on, which I didn't have because I didn't explore those things. And again, like, you're 18 years old, you don't know what you don't know type thing. Like,
but that's really relevant because, you know, there's probably a lot of, you know, parents listening to this, maybe some kids that are in that sort of bracket of getting drafted, and, you know, they'd probably be thinking and reflecting on their own children and going, well, my kid's probably not ready for this. I wasn't even aware of this, and so how am I supposed to teach that to my kids or facilitate them learning it when nobody's really talking about it? Like, no one's sharing this stuff because, again, you get drafted, you're an AFL player, but then you're not. So, you know, take us to that I guess the conclusion of this part of the story, in that, you know, you've got to the end of that first season, you come back to Adelaide for holidays, for Christmas break, and then, like, what happened then?
So I still remember the day that I found out that I'd been delisted. I was sitting on the beach at Henley, and got a phone call from John Longmire. You know, I was expecting to hear something around that time. Like, they'd said to me, we're going to wait till after the trade period. Once after the trade period, we'll let you know, type thing. Trade period passed, and I got a phone call, and it's John Longmire saying, he's like, "Hey, how you going?" He's like, "What are you up to?" I was like, "Oh, just at the beach." He's like, "Oh, are you in Sydney?" I was like, "Nah, I'm at the beach now." He's like, "Okay, cool." He's like, and then I think he said something. He's like, "Oh," he's like, "Do you want me to call you back?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, okay. Let me just get off the beach, and then, you know, I'll call you back or something." And one of my mates actually lived across the road from the beach where I was at, and so I went to his house and was sitting in his house, and, you know, had the phone call and basically got the news. He's like, and said, again, I can't really remember what it was, but along the lines of, you know, you're a rookie, you only get 1 year, you know, you didn't have any luck with injuries. Basically, we picked up someone else in the trade period who played a similar position to you. Basically, thanks and goodbye type thing. I mean, a bit nicer than that. It wasn't too bad, but and then I remember I remember sitting there, and I almost like used, I think I almost used humour as like that whole, you know,
sounds fairly like you.
Yeah, like the whole you know, didn't want it to be a big thing, so I just got delisted, and then, like, you know, my mate was, "Oh shit, sorry," like, you know, and whatnot, and then I went and told my manager, and he was actually shocked. He's like, "Oh, definitely thought you were going to get another one, blah blah blah." And then I messaged my housemate, who at the time, from Sydney, who moved back to Adelaide, and I was like, "Oh, can I live with you in Adelaide?" And he's like, "What? Are you kidding me?" And I was like, "Nah." So it was just that experience of, you know, one day you've got your dream and you're working towards that and whatever, and then the next day it's literally taken away from you, and in a split second, and again, probably naivety on my part, whatever, on my part. I was like, "Ah, it's okay. I'll just, you know, I'll get drafted to another club instead." And it's like, and yes, that can happen and whatnot. But it's quite challenging to then get picked up again the next year. So it'll sort of come crashing down. So as we talk about, like, I've gone up this massive high and then basically fallen off the end of the cliff, and didn't have much to fall back on. Like, I was kind of like, all right, now what, type thing. So.
Yeah, it's, again, like, it's the part of the dream that people don't think of, because we give so much support to someone to get to their goal, and that being, in this case, to get drafted, yet we don't actually give them the support for what happens when it doesn't work out. Yeah. And, like, again, it comes back to kind of the service we're trying to provide, or the experience, and that we don't want people to feel like that. You know, we want them to have the alternative, which is, well, okay, here I am. Like, it's not where I necessarily want to be, or, you know, but I've got the tools to overcome this challenge. So, you know, when you get diagnosed with a stress fracture again, it's like, well, okay, what do I need to do? How can I demonstrate that I'm doing everything I can to myself, but also to the people around me? So there's this real conviction around your behaviours and your actions that, like, I'm here for the long term. Like, I'm here to reach my goal, which is to play 100 games or 2.
Yeah, and I think that like looking back now, if I knew, if I was in the exact same situation that I was back then, got injured, and I knew exactly what I knew now, I feel like I'm very, very confident that I would have got another year based on, you know, how much I would have doubled down on everything then and gone, okay, well, I need to do, you know, more video stuff, more knowledge stuff, more, you know, speak up more in meetings, blah blah blah, to then show how much I wanted to be there and demonstrate it rather than just sitting there going, oh, poor me, like kind of another injury type thing. So
but the cruel irony of that is that most of us don't reach that point of reflection and ability to do that stuff until at least our mid-20s.
Yeah.
Because again, we haven't had that preparation leading into it. So you talked about Luke Parker. Well, great. He had some kind of experience as a child and a youth where he's gone through a process of learning how to persevere and how to, you know, have that both tenacity and conviction in his own actions, that people gain confidence from that. Yeah. So, you know, when you're in a position like that, it's almost your job to give other people confidence in you, not to hope that someone will have confidence in you to then find your own. Yeah. And again, we don't learn that. Like it's something that we fumble our way through, and then we either get there or we don't. It's somewhere in our 20s or our 30s or our 40s. Yeah. And by that point, it's like, oh, if only I'd had all of this back then.
Yeah, and this doesn't have to be just sport. Like, you know, we can talk about it in terms of anything in life. It can be work, family, anything. You can be on this path to what you think is, you know, your dream life or dream career or dream family, and then one day you can just, you know, something can happen and all of a sudden, you know, your job's taken away from you, you know, something happens in your family or, you know, the breakdown or whatever it is, and then you're left there and go, oh no, what's next? And a lot of people just sit there and either play the victim or you know, get in some sort of panic, or they freeze because they don't know what to do. They kind of just sit there and go, I don't know what to do, because they don't have the tools to be able to deal with this. Yeah. Everything that we're teaching is about, you know, trying to, no matter what the situation is, you have tools that you can fall back onto. So you can go, all right, this happened. Yes, okay, it's not what I wanted to happen. And okay, rather than falling off the edge of this cliff, I can start to build a bridge and
well, a great example of that is, like, it was 12 months ago that you had all of these massive, or just over 12 months ago, massive life changes, and that you know, had a long-term relationship that came to an end. You had you know, the conclusion of your SNFL football career, but by your choice. Like you went, actually, this isn't where I want to be right now. This is what I want to do. We had a new business, like, you know, in terms of the adaptability movement, we pivoted from just sports performance and doing a lot of these things in a sports performance environment, but then realizing we're actually limiting our access to be able to reach other people through that. And then you moved out of home as well, because you were living at home at that point. So you've just gone, oh, I'm just going to change up 4 massive life things all at once. And, you know, the way that you adapted during that, as opposed to how you did as an 18, 19-year-old, is profoundly different. Yeah. Because by that point, you've actually done all this personal development work. You've invested in yourself and in that that growth mindset to go, well, there's opportunity in this. Like, it's okay. Some of it was a surprise or wasn't predicted. Others were by your own choosing, and it's like, well, how do I respond to this now, rather than being a victim of life and saying, oh, well, it's woe is me. And I don't mean to shame anyone when I say that, because there is genuine reasons why you can feel like that sometimes, and it is a helpful coping strategy for a period of time. Yeah. But if we live there for the rest of our lives, it is deeply unsatisfying.
Yeah, and like, I mean, as you said, that was a huge point in my life, like, I guess whatever you want to call it, tipping point or whatever, in terms of the major things in my life. Because it was like, I remember that it all happened within the space of a month, and I remember reflecting on it and going, wow, like, my life was literally completely different a month ago. Like, you know, there's obviously common threads between it still, but, you know, the 3 or 4 main things that I spent most of my time doing were like completely different now. And I was like, this is, and to me, I took that as an amazing opportunity. So I went like, okay, what can I do now? I now have all this extra time because of not playing SNFL anymore. I was single, so I had more time because of that. You know, I was living in a new place, so experiencing new things, and our business had pivoted. So it was like, well, here's all these opportunities. So what can I do with it? And then I started, you know, creating things that I want. I started to create more of a life that I wanted to live,
Yeah.
and that ultimately has ended up in me being in a lot better place in terms of footy wise. I ended up playing the year with my mates and having my most enjoyable year of footy, like bar none, easily. I've found a new and amazing partner who, like, everything that I learned from my previous relationship has now applied it to this relationship, and it's like spectacularly amazing.
Ray, if you're listening.
Yeah, that's how I describe it. And then I've moved again since now, and fourth thing was the business, and now doing something that I feel a lot more connected to on a daily basis, rather than doing something which I kind of just felt almost obligated to do because we've been doing it for so long.
And this is a great point. So all of those things, change came in your life because, for different reasons for each one, but like in certain situations it was because that's where you were. And so we kind of get attached to what we know, like we get anchored into that situation. And sometimes we don't acknowledge the signs that something is sort of coming to a conclusion, whether that be a job, a relationship, an SANFL career, however you want to put it. It feels safer kind of just stay and just like, I'll just sit here a bit longer. I'll just wait it out. Hopefully things will get better. Like, I can't count the amount of people I've spoken to, particularly in a work situation where they're holding on.
Yeah.
They're waiting for something to change, knowing damn well that the situation or the environment is not a good place for them to be.
Yeah.
And they end up just self-sabotaging anyway. Like, whether that's like consciously or unconsciously, they want out. Yeah. And the sooner you can sort of get in a habit, I guess, of being someone that regularly reflects and reviews their life to go, is this still the direction I want to head in? Is this still the place and the people that I want to be around? Like, if money and time were not a barrier, what would I be doing differently? Yeah. And then try and align yourself as closely to that as possible, acknowledging that time and money are a thing. Yeah. But, to have that point of reflection to go, actually, what is possible? Like, what else would I like to be doing? Yeah. And it takes courage, because there's a safety in what you know, even if it's not satisfying, to then leap into the unknown and go, oh, like, this is a bit scary, unknown, like, and will I even make it, or should I just stay in this sort of safe, fortnightly sort of wage or whatever it is? And
I think that's the point that we got in. In the business we realized that we can keep doing the safe thing and doing what we were doing, or we could try something, have a bit of courage and do something that we felt more connected to, where we felt we could have a big impact, and we fundamentally felt that it was going to be a better life for us and for the people who we were working with. Yeah. The same in same in the relationship. I could have stayed in there and it would have been safe in terms of what and all, like. When you end a relationship, you're always like, is anyone ever going to love me again? Like, or like,
it's a real thing.
I know. It's like, it's that type of thing that's like, you're like, what's you don't know what is out there for you. And then the footy career, I was always known as a footy player. I've always been known as a footy player. The first thing most people ask me is, how's footy going, type thing. And it's like, thankfully that's changed a fair bit now. But I always just felt like I had to play footy because that's what I had to do. Like, you played until you couldn't play anymore, and then you stopped. But I got to the point where I was like, is this giving me what I want from it? And I realized, no, it's not. It wasn't feeding me what I wanted to, and I wanted to enjoy it more. I wanted to be able to spend more time with my mates and play with them before they got too old and retired. And
sure.
And ultimately made that decision, and I've been very, very happy with it ever since. So.
Yeah, and like I remember having those conversations with you at the time, because there's a little part of me that's living vicariously through you after my injury and not sort of concluding footy the way I wanted to either. And it was like, well, do you need to go to another club? Do you need a different environment? Like, what would be more stimulating for you? Where would you feel you were meeting that need of yours? And when you rang me to tell me that you, not only were you leaving SANFL, but that you were going to play Div 4 with your mates, and I was like, mate, that's freaking awesome. Like, how good. Like, to have that conviction in what you actually want. Like, I had no doubt in my mind that was where you wanted to be and that you were living that. And there's no greater feeling for me than seeing someone kind of grow into their own their own self-worth, their own self-confidence, that had that conviction to go, I know what I want and I know what I'm worth, and this is what I'm willing to do to achieve it. So it was a cool moment to kind of share in with you, just seeing you go through that process, and then realizing that this year, like playing with your mates and, you know, taking the club from Div, not solely you, but obviously contributing to the club, going from Div 4 to Div 3 with a goal of actually making... Sorry, Div 5 to Div 4, beg your pardon. You know, with a goal to continue that process. You know, you're investing in the club in other ways, both through our business as well as the coaching coordinator next year. So there's this, you know, it's meeting a need, like to do something with other people to grow and to build something together.
Yeah, I think it's like I've just got this, you know, different sense of purpose now. Like before, my purpose with my footy was to be the best player I could be, and, you know, play at high level as I could for as long as I could, and that was always what I said. But then I kind of realised, well, actually, I just want to enjoy it, and then I also want to help other people to get better. And ever since moving to the club, I don't know. I never fully understood people who were volunteers and gave up all their time for year after year after year for the club. I'm like, what are they getting out of it? But then, you know, the more I invested in a local club, and the more I sort of, you know, did more stuff with people, I'm like, okay, I get this now. I get why people. It's like it's not about me. It's not about it. It has nothing to do with me or my status or what I, you know, get out of this. This is actually like, how can I help, you know, these kids get better? How can I help you know, the club become a bigger, better club type thing? And it's
because if you do that, it feeds all of us.
Exactly.
That concept of mutual benefit that we talk so much about. Like whenever you go into a new relationship, whether that be, you know, with other people at the club, whether it be with a partner, you know, the idea being that how do we make this work for both of us? We have this idea in society that we have to leverage as best, you know, we can, because there's not enough. So we need to get more than our fair share to make sure that we'll be okay. And it's very dehumanizing. It's very transactional. Whereas when we can sort of just take a step back for that and go, actually, there's enough for everyone. Like there is, with an abundance mindset, we can create enough for both of us. In fact, we can probably create more than enough for just the two of us. And you invest in that. And to me, like, it feels obvious now. Like I doubt that I always had that kind of view of it. But, you know, this is a reason why we're so passionate about teaching that as well, to go into clubs and to help them realize that possibility of, you know, people are going to give more freely if they feel connected to other people at the club, if they feel connected to the brand that the club stands for, the values that the club stands for. So, like, let's invest in that, and let's do that in a way where people feel heard and they feel welcome and they feel like they have an opportunity to contribute, which is not based on their status at the club. It's based on just their willingness to give. And it comes so free and easy with that, without all the hang-ups of the bitterness and the resentment and the chip on the shoulder and the undermining of someone else because of ego. And, you know, there's all of these destructive behaviours that creep in when we operate from that scarcity mindset and that sort of just survival mindset. When we flip that to abundance and to adaptability, like, it's infinite possibility. It's freaking cool, which is why we're here. Like,
exactly.
So again, we'll come back to the Adaptable Academy. So again, just one of the things that we do, we obviously work with organisations, you know, in business as well as sporting clubs as well as schools, but we're specifically talking about these Adaptable Academies, which run in sports clubs and in sports schools. So how, like, what is the process that, I obviously know what the process is, but like, what do you need to, or what can we share about the process to make it really easy for people to understand how to get involved and what that entails? Like, if you're going to come in and sign in up for an Adaptable Academy and you're going to run that within your club, like Lockleys, like Woodville Rugby Club, and you know, there's more that we'll be launching and announcing in the next couple of months. But like, where does it start? Like, what's the process?
Well, I guess the first thing is to understand, like, why we do it and what sort of clubs, like, it'll be the right fit for. And it's for clubs who want to invest more in their players, that actually see that a football club or a netball club or a tennis club or whatever it is actually a place where you can actually have a big impact on a young person's life, and a positive impact. And so it's about, you know, helping them to develop all these tools so that, you know, if they do get to the point where they're, you know, up this high or at the lowest of lows, and they might be sort of almost falling off this cliff. They actually have the tools that they can pull themselves back and go, actually, no, this is how I'm going to navigate this situation and how I'm going to create more opportunity and be more adaptable and whatnot. And like, I mean, it's been something that, from a club's point of view as well, it's been huge in terms of the clubs we've been working with. Retention of players, recruitment's been through the roof, and then just the overall feel from parents, people in the club. It's just making such a greater environment to be around.
It's building a more connected community, really, isn't it? Like, and one which is made up of people that are that are adaptable, that are like giving and wanting to invest in that community because it's also serving them, but not just because it's serving them.
So in terms of getting, like, we've got, you can go to the website, the Adaptability Movement.world/Academies, and you can find out more there. But basically, if you want to have a conversation with us, hit us up. You'll be able to find our contact information, whether it's via email or phone, and we can have a chat to you about what's the best process for your club. We have a range of different topics which we cover. We usually do it on a monthly basis, so whether it's across the span of the whole year, we do one session a month type thing. Some's physical, some's mental, emotional side of things. So everything's done in a practical and experiential way, so that the athletes, it's not just like sitting in the classroom and learning. They're actually getting an experience of everything that we're talking about, and they're starting to put it in place, so then they can have an action plan as to how they can implement it into their lives, and whatnot. So just get in touch with us, and we'll be more than happy to chat you through the process of how to go about it, and we can come present to your boards or your committees or whoever it might be, and we can speak to the benefits of what it's going to do for your players, for your club, for the whole community. Yeah,
and also the risks that it mitigates, because some of the clubs that we're currently working with, the relationships come about because they needed to address a high priority need.
Yeah,
like they'd lost people through suicide or through mental health issues. They'd had significant fractures in relationships, and it doesn't have to be that way. Like, both that you don't have to be in that position already to bring us in to be able to invest in that community, but also you don't need to go through that yourself to then have to get to a point where you start investing in this stuff. It's about going, well, more is possible. And there is a lot of trauma that's existed, particularly in the last 3 years, with everything that's happened with lockdowns and mask wearing and social isolation and all these massive changes to the way we operate in society. And throughout that, like, a lot of people have lost their social support, or they've retreated because of that conflict or that stress that's existed in that environment. And these are supposed to be safe places. If we can't feel safe in our community, in our team, then where can we feel safe? No. So to me, like, I think there's a really profound impact that can be had, and a necessary one, by investing in your club and community in this way, because again, you're just helping people feel better and perform better. Like, it's a simple recipe from our point of view. And you're doing it in a way that's fun and engaging and easy. Like, it's, like I said, it's experiential, it's practical. We're not pulling out the books and going, okay, sit down, we've got lesson 2 and chapter 4, and like, have you read it, and all this sort of stuff. It's actually like, hey, let's go and do this. Let's go and try this and test it and see how it works for you.
And it's kind of gotten to the point now in society where the bigger risk is to not do something these days. Is like, you can sit back and go, it's not our problem, nothing's this, and then all of a sudden something happens, and then that's when you get into the trouble starts to happen. So it's almost, yes, okay, there's obviously a commitment in terms of time, financials, all this sort of stuff, but it's almost like, what are you missing out? Like, what are you risking by not committing those things? Like, are you going to be a club that sort of sits around and does it the way everything's always been done, or are you going to be a club like the ones we worked with, and they want to do things differently? They want to give the club experiences that they've never had before, and not just follow the same path that's the way things always been done. Like, we've been fortunate enough to obviously work with Lockleys Footy Club and do a lot around their strategic plan of the branding of what they want, a Lockleys player to be like, you know, what they want, the coaches, the volunteers, everything, the whole club, like what does Lockley stand for, and who is someone that sort of represents Lockleys, and what does that look like type thing, and that's going to be something that, you know, we're going to continue to work with them moving forward, and it's it's really exciting because it's for us in terms of, you know, we get to play that role in, you know,
we help to get shade
side of things.
And innovation, like in a way that can make things better, like can make a community come together and feel more connected, again, safer, more valued.
Yeah, I mean, we're fortunate that we've been a part of many different clubs ourselves, you know, of all different sports, you know, all different levels. Some really good, some not so good. So, you know, we have a lot of experience in terms of helping people to understand what works and what doesn't work, and I mean, you can have something on a piece of paper and it looks good, but if you've never actually done it yourself, like, how do you know that it's actually going to work? Type thing. So and like we've been, you know, into university both as students as well as, you know, going back and teaching and those kind of things as well. So it's not to diminish the academic side of it. Like we've got that, like we've had that experience, but it's also like, you got to go and test it, and then you got to review it, and then you got to tweak it, and you got to re-implement it. And I guess that's more the point, is that, like, you know, it's all good and well to say we're going to go and get insert, you know, professional title here, but it's like, you know, like you can go to one physiotherapist and go to another physiotherapist, and it can be vastly different outcomes. You can go to a naturopath versus a doctor, and one will work for one and one will work better for another. But like it's really the individualized relationship of how, you know, you communicate and how you interact with that community, and that's the thing we feel really good about. And as we said, it's not limited to footy clubs. We use that as an example today, but we're also working with Brighton Surf Lifesaving Club. We work with CV High School and other organisations like that. So we've had an opportunity to, again, influence the direction of their vision and their community, and that's the part that's satisfying for us when we talk about mutual benefit. There is an exchange of money, because that's part of how we, you know, meet our fundamental human needs and pay rent and food and the rest of it. But it's that interaction of emotional energy in terms of like sharing in someone else's vision and goals, and being part of that process of, you know, failing a few times and learning from that and recovering from it to respond really well and to actually move towards what you want. That's exciting for us. So again, we'd invite you to get in contact. Head to the adaptabilitymovement.world. If you haven't signed up to or subscribed to the podcast already, we'd love it if you could do that for us and give us a review. All of those things just help us reach more people, and hopefully if you're finding it useful, then someone else, you know, near and dear to you might as well. So, and we'll also put our ebook down below, or you can find it on our website as well. So
so always check the show notes. There's always some little tidbits and gold nuggets in there that we try and throw in for free as well. So thanks.